Hi guys, I'm Woodcraft Hamster, and I thought I'd do another one of these little kind of talking videos today. There's quite a few topics that spring into my mind every now and again that I think it'd be worth a bit of a chat on here and just to get other people's views on. And what I want to talk about today is bushcraft and education. There was a little thing a while ago, it was back in 2016, and it was to do with in particular rural schools here in the UK introducing, I don't think they termed it as bushcraft, but it was bushcraft style topics into their curriculum. It was aimed at sort of junior schools, the ages of I think it's sort of 8 till 11, something like that, and it really struck a chord with me. And I remember having quite a few conversations with people about it at the time. I've been meaning to do this video, so really it was more to get your views and to share a few of mine on education and whether or not bushcraft has a place in that, and if it doesn't, whether it should do. And I mean, ultimately my view is I believe it should. I think bushcraft, although how can I put this, it's a very difficult subject to try and sort of have that conversation about, because what most of us do in bushcraft, and whether that's kind of fire lighting, foraging, shelter building, plant and tree identification, all these kind of things are not really in the public eye anymore. And apart from us as bushcrafters who have that kind of interest, and maybe in rural communities a little bit more so, it's just not something people need to know nowadays, certainly from an education point of view. And as much as I do agree with that, there's very little cause for most people, especially in the UK, but in a lot of parts of the developed world, to need to know how to build a shelter, to need to know how to light a fire. And it goes back to a video I did last year. I was myself and a bunch of friends and family, and we had a little fire pit out in the garden, and out of about 10 of us, 9 of them spending probably about half an hour trying to get this thing lit, I was the only one who knew how to properly light a fire. And is that a skill that you need in the modern day? Probably not, let's be honest, but I still think there is a genuine benefit to knowing this kind of thing. And I think bushcraft goes above and beyond the individual parts of it, whether that's fire lighting, shelter building, and all these things I've said before. But I think also, one of the epitomes, the essence of bushcraft, and I know this is a phrase that gets bandied around a lot, but you've got leave no trace. And there's certainly a lot of people that could benefit from learning a bit more about that. I expect many of us are familiar with this, going out to a favourite stomping ground and finding massive fire scars and beer cans and broken bottles and God knows what else. But I think the essence of bushcraft, I think, would be very useful for young people. I'm not saying it needs to go up to things like GCSE or A levels or anything like that, but certainly as a grounding, especially for younger children, I think it would be a very, very useful thing. Now I know there's a lot of insurance issues with things like this, and things like knife skills and being around fires and things like that, and I'm pretty sure it could be done in such a way that it could be got through the insurers and that kind of thing. I mean, let's face it, most schools, as far as I know, still teach what I knew as home economics, what I suspect they're terming as cookery, or some other kind of very strange choice on words, as they seem to be doing for a lot of things nowadays. But if kids are being allowed in a class using knives, or even things like woodworking and metalworking classes, which I know are a bit of a dying breed, but they are still around, I don't see why bushcraft should be any different. And even if it was just to get people in to give demonstrations, I think there really is a real benefit to younger children understanding things like how to prepare a fire, how to build a shelter, You know, understanding more about the natural environment, understanding more about, you know, depending on the age range, things like sustainability. You know, maybe not so much you know, as far as woodland management per se, though I think that would still be useful for those interested in it. But you know, things like, you know, if you go out to the woodland, you know, not you know, breaking branches off trees and you know, trawling through undergrowth and sort of stamping down on plants and things like that. You know, just real basic things like this. And I suppose that moves on a little bit to things like food sourcing, you know, and I know there will be a really mixed crowd of pro and con on this. But you know, I saw a documentary, again I think this was last year, and it was a group of families going off to a farm, and they were learning how to rear livestock, caring for them all the way through right until the end, where they were taken off to a slaughterhouse. I believe this one was specially built, where there was kind of like a viewing room, and you could kind of see what happened behind the glass. And you know, there were some people who were really for it, and there were some people who were very distressed by it. And I appreciate it's a very emotive subject and probably a very tricky one to tackle. But you know, in the same breath, you know, I do think there is a real disconnect, if you like, for especially for younger children, understanding where food comes from. Now that's plants as well as meat, you know, vegetables, that kind of thing. But I really feel that, you know, we are missing out in our education system here in showing younger children where things come from. I mean, let's be honest, and I know this is normally said a bit tongue-in-cheek, but you know, if you ask most young children where food comes from this day and age, they will tell you it comes from the supermarket in a packet. And I think, you know, if that's the general belief of young children today, that really does need to be changed. You know, it's not something that you know, can be any good for us. You know, there really is this real misunderstanding of where food comes from. And again, you know, I mean, I was of an age where things like our science classes, you know, part of our curriculum at the time for biology was to dissect a frog. And I was probably at the tail end of that. That was removed from the curriculum, I think, fairly shortly after I finished school, because of the perceived distress and that kind of thing, you know, that it caused. But actually, I think it was a really good thing. You know, it was a very good way of showing where yeah, muscle groups and organs and these kind of things were. And I think, to be honest, and I appreciate, I'll probably get some stick for this from some people, but you know, I think that we've gone too far the other way with political correctness and this kind of thing, and people who go, oh no, I don't like that kind of thing, oh no, it's horrible, oh it's distressful for children. Well, actually, everyone from sort of my age range and backwards from there, I think would have done exactly the same thing, and I don't think any of us came out any the worse for it. So yeah, I mean, I've been rambling on for a little while, guys, but you know, I think my view is there. If you take away the political correctness side of it and the sort of the very wishy-washy attitude that we have with children nowadays, and putting them in a bubble and wrapping them in cotton wool, I think they as generally as maybe a bit of a life lesson, and just an overall kind of grounding in a lot of different aspects of things like bushcraft. You know, I think they would really benefit from that if it was introduced into the education system. Now, I'm not on a campaign, I'm not trying to get this pushed through or anything, it's really just my thoughts following some conversations I had a little while ago, and I'd be really interested in the comments to hear your views. You know, do you think that would be a good idea? You know, are you in agreement that, you know, maybe even though it may not be a life skill per se, and something that you could potentially walk out of school and go into a career with, but then again, you could say that with things like trigonometry. You know, I spent hours upon hours when I was at school being forced to do, you know, what I suppose would be termed as advanced mathematics, that I have not used since I walked out those school doors many years ago. So, you know, is it something that would be helpful to people? I don't know. Interested to hear your views. And you know, I think just in general, giving children a better understanding of sort of the natural world around us, which, let's be honest, is dwindling away probably as I speak. And you know, maybe it would give the next generation something a little bit more to think about, and give them a little bit more, what's the word for it? A little bit more sort of compassion when it comes to natural resources, and you know, woodlands and green areas in general. And also, you know, it's one of those things that, apart from the obligatory physical education lessons that we have, you know, it would get kids out of the classroom. It would get them out into the school fields, or maybe to local wooded areas if they're available in certain places. You know, out in the fresh air, doing things in nature. And maybe it would encourage some people not to be sitting in front of the TV or in front of the games consoles, and actually get out there and sort of take an interest in nature. But anyway, as I say, guys, I have rambled on far too long, so I hope it was useful. Really interested to get your views on this in the comments below. You know, is this something that you think would be a really bad idea? You know, am I talking rubbish? You know, am I not being what's the word? Am I not considering the frailty and the fragileness of our young children of today? Or do you sort of agree more with my point of view, and actually maybe we are coddling our children a little bit too much, and perhaps you know, reintroducing this kind of stuff would give them a newer, fresher outlook, you know, as opposed to the standard education that we're providing. So that was it. Hope it was useful. Comments and questions in the box below. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I hope you'll all join me next time. Thanks, guys.